Imagine a moment meant for honor, a quiet ceremony to remember a fallen hero. Now picture that moment shattered, not by grief, but by betrayal, as a decorated Air Force veteran, standing tall in her uniform, is suddenly handcuffed, accused of a crime she never committed, all caught live on camera for the world to see. Families froze in horror, expecting her to crumble under the shame. Instead, her unbreakable spirit ignited a firestorm that swept the nation. What unfolded wasn't just a fight for one woman's dignity. It became a movement that exposed corruption, hate, and the cracks in a system meant to protect us all. Stay with us. This story will shake you to your core, and you won't believe how far it goes. Hit that comment section. Tell us your story, where you're from, and let's fight this injustice together. The late summer sun dipped low over Oakridge Memorial Park, a quiet expanse of green on the outskirts of a small Ohio town. The air was warm, carrying the scent of freshly cut grass and wildflowers, but there was a heaviness that clung to the breeze, a weight that spoke of loss and remembrance. Captain Lauren Carter stood near the center of the gathering, her Air Force dress uniform pressed and pristine, the medals on her chest glinting faintly in the golden light. Her dark brown eyes, usually sharp and focused, softened with a mix of pride and sorrow as she looked at the polished granite plaque engraved with the name of her fallen comrade, Captain Mikey Torres. Lauren and Mikey had been inseparable during their years in the Air Force. They'd met during basic training in 2012 at Lackland Air Force Base, two kids from opposite sides of the country. She from a working-class black family in Cleveland, he from a Mexican-American family in San Antonio, bonded by a shared dream of serving their country. Lauren, then a shy 19-year-old, had been intimidated by the drills, the shouting instructors, the relentless pace. Mikey, with his easy smile and boundless energy, noticed her struggling during a 5-mile run and slowed down to pace her. "You got this, Carter," he'd said, his voice steady. "We don't leave anyone behind." That moment marked the beginning of a friendship that would carry them through years of service. Over the next decade, they'd flown missions together. Lauren as a logistics officer, ensuring their squadron had the fuel, munitions, and supplies to survive. Mikey as a pilot, with a fearless streak that earned him both reprimands and respect. In 2019, during a reconnaissance mission over Afghanistan, their C-130 Hercules took heavy enemy fire. Lauren still remembered the chaos, the deafening alarms, the smoke filling the cockpit, the shudder of the aircraft as bullets tore through the fuselage. She'd been in the cargo bay, securing a loose crate of medical supplies when the first hit came. The plane lurched violently, and she slammed into the wall, her helmet cracking against the metal. Mikey's voice came over the comms, steady as ever. "We're not done yet, Carter." "Hold on." His quick thinking, diving to avoid a second barrage, rerouting through a narrow valley, brought them back to base, saving her life and the lives of their crew. They'd laughed about it later, over lukewarm coffee in the mess hall, but the bond had deepened into something unbreakable. "You owe me one," Mikey had teased, his grin wide. "I'll pay you back in coffee," Lauren had shot back, and they'd both laughed, the tension of the day melting away. 2 years ago, that bond was tested in the worst way. On a routine training flight over Nevada, Mikey's jet, a sleek F-16 he'd nicknamed Thunder, suffered a catastrophic mechanical failure. The hydraulic system failed mid-flight, sending the jet into an unrecoverable spiral. Mikey had radioed for help, his voice calm even as the situation deteriorated. "Mayday, mayday, hydraulic failure, attempting manual override." But there was no override for a failure that severe. The jet crashed in the desert, a fireball visible for miles. Lauren had been stateside, on leave, visiting her mother in Cleveland when the call came. The voice on the other end, her squadron commander, was clinical, detached. "Captain Torres didn't make it. Equipment malfunction. Condolences. The words hit like a physical blow. She dropped the phone, sinking to the kitchen floor, her mother's arms around her as the tears came. Mikey had been more than a teammate. He was family, the brother she'd never had. His death left a void that no promotion or medal could fill. For months, Lauren had replayed their last conversation in her head, a quick call before his flight, where he'd promised to visit her in Ohio for the holidays. "We'll get your mom's famous cornbread," he'd said, laughing. She hadn't known it would be the last time she'd hear his voice. Today, September 12th, 2025, marked the third annual memorial for Mikey, a tradition started by his parents, Maria and Carlos Torres, to honor their son's legacy. The crowd was small but deeply connected. About 50 people gathered in a semicircle around the plaque. Veterans from the local VFW chapter stood in their dark blue jackets, caps removed in respect. High school students from the JROTC program Mikey had mentored after retiring from active duty stood in formation, their young faces serious. Townsfolk who'd known Mikey as the teenager who mowed lawns and delivered newspapers dotted the crowd, some whispering memories of his infectious laugh. Maria and Carlos sat at the front, Maria clutching a small photo of Mikey in his flight suit, Carlos leaning on a cane, his hands scarred from decades in the steel mills. Lauren stepped forward to speak, her polished black shoes silent on the grass. She cleared her throat, her voice steady but thick with emotion. Mikey Torres wasn't just a pilot. He was a friend, a son, a mentor, a hero who gave everything for us. I wear this uniform today because of him, because of the courage he showed every day, the way he taught me that service isn't just about duty, but about heart. Her gaze swept the crowd, lingering on Maria, who dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, and Carlos, who saluted weakly, his trembling hands betraying the strength he'd once had. Mikey believed in protecting the vulnerable, in standing up when others couldn't. Today, we honor that. A soft murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. The ceremony continued with a moment of silence, broken only by the rustle of leaves in the oak trees lining the park. A young JROTC cadet, a girl named Emily, read a poem Mikey had loved, her voice quivering but clear. Then came the folding of the American flag, a tradition Lauren had overseen too many times in her career. She supervised the process herself, her movements precise, her hand steady despite the ache in her chest. When the flag was folded into a tight triangle, she knelt before Maria and handed it to her. "For Mikey," she whispered. Maria's hands shook as she took it, her eyes glistening. "Thank you, Lauren. He'd be so proud of you." Lauren nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I'll be right back," she said softly. "I left something in my car, a photo album of our missions. I want you to have it." Maria managed a small smile, and Lauren turned, walking across the gravel path toward her silver SUV parked near the park's entrance. The sun was sinking lower now, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, casting long shadows across the rows of cars. Lauren's vehicle stood out, a small Air Force decal on the rear window catching the fading light. As she approached her car, a white police cruiser rolled up slowly, its tires crunching on the gravel. Lauren noticed it, but didn't think much at first. Small towns often had police at public events, a precaution meant to reassure. But the cruiser didn't keep moving. It stopped directly behind her SUV, blocking her in. 2 officers stepped out. Officer Ryan Kessler was younger, wiry, with a nervous twitch in his jaw and a hand resting on his radio. Officer Greg Holland was older, broad-shouldered, with a permanent sneer and eyes hidden behind mirrored sunglasses. Kessler spoke first, his tone sharp. "Ma'am, we need to speak with you." Lauren straightened instinctively, her military training kicking in. "Is there a problem, officer?" Holland stepped closer, his sneer deepening. "We received a report of someone impersonating military personnel in the area. Matches your description." For a moment, Lauren thought it was a mistake. A prank call, maybe, or a mix-up. She kept her voice calm, professional. "I'm in uniform. I served 10 years in the Air Force. Logistics and combat support. I'm here for a memorial. You can check my ID." Without hesitation, she reached into her uniform jacket, retrieving her military ID and driver's license, holding them out with the same steady hand that had once coordinated supply drops under fire. Kessler barely glanced at the cards, his eyes flicking back to her face. These can be faked. We've seen it before. People scamming for sympathy, dressing up to get handouts. The accusation hit harder than Lauren expected. 10 years of service, missions in Afghanistan, Iraq, countless nights ensuring her squadron had what they needed to survive, and now this? She kept her composure, but her jaw tightened. "I'm here to honor a fallen comrade. These people know me." She gestured toward the crowd, where a few veterans had begun to notice the exchange, their murmurs growing louder. Holland crossed his arms, his sunglasses reflecting the last rays of sunlight. "Doesn't mean you didn't rent that uniform for the day. We've had reports of stolen valor around here. Turn around, hands behind your back." The words were a slap, not just to Lauren, but to every moment she'd spent in service, every scar she carried, physical and emotional. Her mind raced. She could argue, cite military law, demand they verify her ID through proper channels. But then she saw Maria watching from across the grass, her face pale, her hands clutching the folded flag. Carlos stood beside her, gripping his cane, his eyes wide with fear. Not for himself, but for Lauren. For Mikey's sake, for their sake. She couldn't let this escalate into something worse. "This is a mistake," she said quietly, her voice low but firm. "And it's going to cost you." She turned slowly, placing her hands behind her back. Holland grabbed her wrists roughly, the cold metal of the handcuffs snapping shut with a sharp click. Too tight, deliberately tight, the edges biting into her skin. "Stay still," he ordered, his tone dripping with disdain. A veteran in the crowd, an older man with a Vietnam War cap, called out, "That's Lauren Carter. She served with Torres. Let her go." Kessler spun toward him, hand on his baton. "Step back, or you'll be detained too." Lauren didn't resist. She didn't speak. She kept her shoulders back, her head high, not out of defiance, but because she refused to let them strip her of her dignity along with her freedom. Kessler leaned in close, his breath hot on her ear. "It's just a formality. Cooperate, and this'll be over quick." But Lauren knew better. She'd heard the stories. Black veterans stopped, questioned, humiliated, sometimes worse. She'd sat through briefings on racial profiling, on how formalities could turn deadly for people who looked like her. She wouldn't let this be one of those stories. Before they reached the cruiser, she'd already decided who to call. The cuffs dug deeper into Lauren's wrists as the officers led her away from the memorial gathering. Each step on the gravel path echoed in the stunned silence that had fallen over the crowd. People didn't know what to say. Some looked horrified, others angry, a few too shocked to react. Maria stumbled forward, the folded flag slipping in her hands, her voice breaking. "She's innocent! You can't do this!" Carlos raised a trembling fist, his face flushed with rage. "You're disrespecting my son's memory. He died for this country." From the edge of the crowd, a young JROTC student named Sarah Jenkins pulled out her phone, her hands shaking, but her resolve firm. She hit record and began live streaming, her voice trembling but determined. "This is Captain Lauren Carter, an Air Force veteran, being handcuffed at her friend's memorial in Oakridge Park." She showed her ID, but they ignored it. "This is wrong." The video uploaded instantly to social media, views climbing as the town, and soon the country, watched in horror. Within minutes, the stream had 5,000 views, comments flooding in. Disgraceful. Free Lauren. This is America. Kessler kept his hand on Lauren's elbow, guiding her firmly toward the cruiser. Holland trailed behind, his sneer unchanged, as if the growing unrest didn't faze him. "You're making a serious mistake," Lauren said, her voice calm but cutting. Kessler didn't respond. He opened the back door of the cruiser and motioned for her to get inside. Before she ducked into the seat, Lauren turned her head slightly toward the crowd. "Call General Patricia Ramsey," she said loudly enough for someone to hear. "Tell her what's happening." Holland gave her a sharp tug. "That's enough." But the words had been spoken. Sarah, still streaming, caught the name and repeated it into her phone. She said, "General Patricia Ramsey. Someone find her!" Lauren slid into the back seat, the door slamming shut with a heavy thud. The cruiser smelled of stale coffee and old vinyl, the scratched metal cage between the front and back seats, a testament to other people's struggles. She'd sat through enough briefings to know how quickly a misunderstanding could turn tragic. Her heart pounded, but she forced herself to breathe evenly, to think like the logistics officer she'd been trained to be. Calm under pressure, always planning the next move. Kessler got behind the wheel, Holland in the passenger seat. For a moment, neither spoke. The radio crackled with unrelated chatter. A fender bender downtown, a lost dog on Main Street. Then Kessler turned halfway in his seat. "You're being detained under suspicion of impersonating a military officer and refusing lawful commands." Lauren stared at him, her voice steady. "I gave you my ID. You looked at it. You ignored it." Kessler's jaw tightened. "It didn't check out because you didn't check it properly," she continued. "That's not for you to decide," he snapped. Holland shifted, his sunglasses still on despite the dimming light. "Look, lady, you cooperate, and this gets sorted at the station. You make a scene, it gets worse. Your choice." Lauren leaned back against the seat, the cuffs pressing into her spine. "The scene already happened, and you created it." Out the window, she saw Maria gesturing frantically to other mourners. Carlos had his phone to his ear, his face a mix of grief and fury. A few others were pointing at the cruiser, arguing with a third officer who'd just arrived. Backup. They were calling for backup for her, an unarmed woman in uniform at a memorial. Sarah's live stream had now hit 10,000 views, the comments section a storm of outrage. "This is racial profiling," one user wrote. "She's a veteran, not a criminal," another added. Sarah narrated as she filmed, her voice growing steadier. "They're putting her in the car. She hasn't done anything wrong. We need help." A man in a VFW jacket, Jim Randall, approached Sarah. "I've got the number for General Ramsey. I served under her in the 90s. Let's make the call." Lauren's mind raced. She couldn't let them take her to the station. Once behind closed doors, away from witnesses, the situation would be harder to control. She'd seen how these stories ended. Body cams, malfunctioning, reports rewritten. She wouldn't let that happen. "I want to make a phone call," she said firmly. Kessler shook his head. "At the station." "That's not how this works," Lauren replied. "Under military protocol, if a service member in uniform is detained, they have the right to contact their commanding officer immediately." Holland scoffed, his sneer twisting into a mocking grin. "This isn't a base. This is a civilian matter." "It became a military matter the second you ignored my ID, and these people started recording," Lauren countered, nodding toward the crowd. Sarah was still streaming, her phone held high, and several others had joined her, their cameras capturing every moment. A teenage boy, one of Mikey's former mentees, shouted, "That's Captain Carter! She's Navy! Let her go!" Another voice chimed in, "I've got it all on video." Kessler exchanged a glance with Holland. "This is escalating," he muttered. "It escalated the moment you put your hands on me," Lauren replied. Holland hesitated, then grunted in frustration, unlocking the barrier between the seats and reaching around to pull Lauren's phone from her uniform pocket. He dropped it into her lap without removing the cuffs. "One call. Make it quick." Lauren maneuvered the phone awkwardly, her wrists aching from the tight cuffs, but she focused. 2 swipes, 1 number. It rang once, twice. General Ramsey. The voice on the other end was sharp, controlled, the kind of voice that had commanded troops through disaster zones. "I've been detained," Lauren said, wasting no time. "Officers Kessler and Holland claim I'm impersonating military personnel. I showed ID. They don't care. It's happening at Oakridge Memorial Park during Mikey Torres' memorial." There was a pause. Then Ramsey's voice came through like a blade. "I'm en route. Don't hang up. Keep the line open." Lauren didn't respond out loud. She didn't need to. The connection stayed live. Holland leaned in. "Who's that, your lawyer?" Lauren held his gaze. "Closer than a lawyer." Kessler's face darkened, but he didn't speak. Outside, the crowd was growing louder. Someone yelled, "That's Captain Carter." She served with Mikey. Another voice added, "I've got it all on video." Holland swore under his breath. "We need to move." But the cruiser didn't pull away. In the rearview mirror, Lauren saw flashing lights. Not a standard patrol car, but a black SUV with government plates. Her phone buzzed softly in her lap. A text appeared from an unknown number. "ETA 5 minutes. Do not resist. Witnesses secured." Lauren allowed herself the smallest of smiles. The cavalry wasn't coming. It was already here. Lauren sat motionless in the back seat, the cuffs still biting into her wrists. The car hadn't moved. The engine idled, but neither Kessler nor Holland seemed eager to drive off. Through the tinted windows, the crowd had doubled in size. People who'd come to mourn Mikey now stood together in a mix of shock and defiance. Maria remained seated near the plaque, but 2 neighbors stood at her side, holding her hands. Carlos was on his feet now, gesturing angrily as he spoke to a group of veterans in dark blue jackets. They weren't armed. They didn't shout, but their presence was a quiet, powerful statement, a line in the sand. Lauren kept her phone balanced on her thigh, the screen glowing faintly. The call with General Ramsey was still connected. No one inside the cruiser had dared tell her to hang up. Ramsey's voice came through, low and steady. "Lauren, status." "I'm cuffed, still in the cruiser. Crowd's growing. At least 5 are filming." "Good," Ramsey said. "Maintain composure. Do not escalate." "I'm calm," Lauren replied. "They're not." From the corner of her eye, she saw Holland shift uncomfortably in his seat. His sunglasses were off now, revealing eyes that darted between the crowd and his partner. Kessler gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles pale. "We should move," Holland muttered. "To where?" Kessler hissed. "The station's 20 minutes away. We'll never get through that crowd without this turning into a riot." "Then call for more units," Holland snapped. Lauren smiled faintly. More units meant more witnesses, more cameras, more chances for someone with sense to see the mistake these 2 had already made. Outside, voices rose. A woman shouted, "That's Lauren Carter! She served with my cousin in Iraq!" A man added, "She's Air Force!" "Let her go!" Kessler grabbed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 14. Situation escalating at Oakridge Memorial Park. Requesting additional units for crowd control." Static crackled. Then a reply came through. "Unit 14, stand by. Command will respond." Lauren tilted her head slightly. That wasn't standard phrasing. Command. She knew police codes well enough to recognize something was off. Someone higher up was stepping in. Holland leaned back, rubbing his face. "What if her ID is real?" he whispered to Kessler. "It doesn't matter now," Kessler hissed. "We've got procedures." "No," Lauren interrupted, her voice sharp but measured. "You had procedures. You ignored them. That's why you're in this situation." Neither man answered. From her lap, the phone buzzed again. A new text lit up the screen. ETA revised. 2 minutes. Media alerted. Lauren's heartbeat quickened, not from fear, but from the momentum she could feel building outside the car. The entire town was waking up. Across the park, Jim Randall, the Vietnam vet, was on the phone with General Ramsey's office, relaying details. Sarah's live stream had hit 50,000 views, shared across veterans groups and local news pages. Comments poured in. "This is an outrage! Where's the accountability?" "Watching from Texas," Sarah narrated through tears. "They're keeping her in the car. She hasn't done anything wrong. We need justice." Behind her, more people gathered. Not just mourners, but passers-by, residents, veterans from nearby towns, even a group of teenagers Lauren recognized from a STEM workshop she'd spoken at last year. The town wasn't just watching. They were mobilizing. Lauren took a slow breath, calming the anger tightening her throat. She had to stay ahead, think strategically, not emotionally. "Officers," she said evenly, "you have two choices. Release me now and issue an apology, or sit here until this becomes something neither of you can walk back from." Kessler snapped his head around. "Is that a threat?" "No," Lauren replied. "That's reality." Holland looked past her toward the growing crowd, his sneer fading. "We need to move," he said again, but his voice lacked conviction. "Too late," Lauren said. The radio crackled again, a different voice this time, firm, authoritative. "Unit 14, this is Lieutenant Daniels. Cease all movement. Do not transport the subject." Kessler paled. "Lieutenant Daniels, repeat. Cease movement. Officers are en route to your location. This order comes from Regional Command." Holland swore softly. What the hell is Regional Command doing involved? But Lauren knew. General Ramsey had already made the right calls. This wasn't just a wrongful detention anymore. It was becoming a jurisdictional nightmare for the police department. Holland tried to argue. "Lieutenant, we were responding to a civilian complaint." "This woman matched the— I've seen the footage," Daniels interrupted. "The subject provided valid military identification. You failed to follow verification procedures. Stand by and await further instruction." Kessler slammed his fist against the dashboard. "This is out of control." "No," Lauren corrected softly. "This is accountability." Outside, blue and red lights flashed as two more vehicles arrived, not standard patrol cars. Lauren recognized the insignia on one immediately. State Military Affairs. The other bore the seal of the Ohio Attorney General's office. Kessler and Holland froze, their bravado draining away in an instant. The rear door of the cruiser opened, and a tall woman in plain clothes, with a badge clipped to her belt, leaned in. "Captain Lauren Carter?" "Yes," Lauren replied. "I'm with the State Military Affairs Office. You are to be released immediately. This detention is unlawful." Kessler began to protest, but the woman raised a hand. "Save it. Body cams are active. Statements will be taken. For now, uncuff her." Holland didn't move. "Now," the woman ordered, her tone brooking no argument. Reluctantly, Holland reached around and unlocked the cuffs. The cold steel fell away, leaving red marks on Lauren's wrists. She rubbed them briefly, but stood tall. "I appreciate your response," she said to the official. "We're not finished," the woman replied quietly. "This is only the beginning." Lauren stepped out of the cruiser, facing the crowd. A cheer rippled through them, not loud, but powerful, respectful. Maria was crying openly now, surrounded by family. Carlos saluted her, his eyes shining with pride. As Lauren took a step forward, a media official from the Attorney General's office approached, notebook in hand. "Captain Carter, would you like to make a statement?" Lauren shook her head. "Not now." She scanned the crowd, noting every phone still filming, every face watching. She didn't need to speak yet. The truth was already out there, and it was just getting started. The weight of the cuffs was gone, but the weight of the moment remained. Lauren stood outside the cruiser, the late summer breeze brushing against her sleeves. Her wrists ached where the metal had bitten in, and she flexed her fingers, slowly regaining feeling. The crowd held steady. No one dispersed. No one lowered their phones. If anything, more had arrived. Neighbors, off-duty firefighters who'd known Mikey, a group of veterans wearing caps from different wars: Vietnam, Desert Storm, Iraq, Afghanistan. Some were in uniform, others carried canes, but all shared the same look of resolve. This wasn't just about Lauren anymore. It was about every time someone in uniform had been doubted, dismissed, disrespected. The official from the State Military Affairs Office remained at Lauren's side, her posture rigid. She leaned in and spoke softly. "Do not engage. Higher authorities are en route." "I'm aware," Lauren replied, her voice steady. "They're already watching." Across the gravel path, Kessler and Holland stood together, faces flushed. Kessler kept glancing toward the crowd, as if he could will them to forget what they'd seen. Holland didn't say a word, his sunglasses back on, a poor shield against the reality closing in. A low hum rippled through the crowd as two black SUVs pulled up beyond the park gate. Not police, not local authorities. The insignia was unmistakable: Federal Emergency Management Agency. And stepping out with deliberate calm was General Patricia Ramsey. Her presence alone changed the air. She wasn't in uniform, but the authority she carried was undeniable. Her sharp eyes scanned the scene, taking in every detail: the crowd, the officers, the cameras. Without breaking stride, she approached Lauren. "Report." "Detained without cause," Lauren replied. "Provided ID, officers refused verification. Escalation followed. Physical harm. Wrist abrasions only, ma'am." Ramsey nodded once, then turned to the officials from the Attorney General's office. "Status?" "Officers failed to follow federal military verification protocols," the lead investigator replied. "They are currently under internal investigation. We've secured initial witness statements and civilian video evidence. Body cam footage pending retrieval." Ramsey didn't waste time. She looked directly at Kessler and Holland. "Names?" Neither answered. It didn't matter. Their names were already known, already recorded. "You are hereby advised," Ramsey continued, her voice clear and firm, "that any further interaction with Captain Carter will constitute obstruction under federal military personnel protection statutes." Kessler opened his mouth, perhaps to argue, but Ramsey's raised hand silenced him. "Save it. I'm not here for your excuses. I'm here for accountability." The crowd stirred. Someone whispered, "She's Air Force too?" Another responded, "That's who Lauren called." Ramsey's gaze swept over the mourners, the veterans, the families gathered in quiet solidarity. "You all witnessed what happened." A chorus of yes answered, phones lifted higher. "Good," Ramsey said. "Stay ready to testify. The system only works when good people speak up." From behind the crowd, a reporter called out, "General Ramsey, is FEMA officially involved?" Ramsey didn't break stride as she moved back to Lauren's side. "No comment at this time." But everyone understood. This wasn't just personal anymore. It was official. It was public. And it wasn't going away. The Attorney General's lead investigator approached Ramsey and Lauren. "We've identified a live stream viewed by over 75,000 people so far. It includes clear audio of the officers dismissing Captain Carter's credentials. Timestamp: 3 minutes into the recording." Lauren felt a swell of quiet vindication. She hadn't needed to shout or resist. The truth had exposed itself. Ramsey nodded. "Secure that footage. We'll need full copies before they start claiming it's been doctored." The investigator gestured for a tech specialist to begin the data collection. Meanwhile, Holland leaned closer to Kessler. "We need a union rep now." Kessler nodded, beads of sweat forming along his hairline. "You'll need more than that," Lauren said quietly. Holland flinched, but said nothing. Ramsey turned back to Lauren. You have the right to pursue a formal complaint, both at the state and federal level. Do you wish to proceed? I do, Lauren replied without hesitation. Good. Ramsey glanced toward the gathered civilians. Your witnesses will be vital. At that moment, Jim Randall, the Vietnam vet, stepped forward. His silver hair glinted in the fading light. I saw everything. So did half this town. We'll speak. More voices joined. So will I. Me too. I have it all recorded. Kessler looked ready to sink into the ground. Holland crossed his arms, trying to look composed, but failing. Ramsey addressed the crowd. I advise you all to preserve your footage. Do not delete or alter it. Investigators will contact each of you for statements. Someone in the back asked, Are they going to be arrested? Ramsey paused, then spoke carefully. That decision will be made shortly. But understand this. Today's actions have consequences. Just then, the radio clipped to Holland's belt crackled to life. A voice, higher command, came through. Officers Kessler and Holland, you are ordered to remain on site. Do not leave the premises. Internal Affairs will conduct immediate interviews. Comply fully. Kessler looked like he might argue, but the look on Ramsey's face stopped him cold. A deputy from the Attorney General's office stepped in. Captain Carter, would you like to be escorted to a secure location while this proceeds? Lauren shook her head. No, I need to finish honoring Mikey. For a moment, silence reigned. Even those who'd been watching through their phone screens lowered them. Ramsey nodded. Then let's do that. Together, they walked back toward the plaque. Maria stood waiting, the folded flag still in her arms. As Lauren approached, Maria's eyes shone, not just with sorrow, but with pride. You stood tall, she whispered. I had to, Lauren replied. They embraced, the moment private despite the public storm swirling around them. Behind them, the officials began securing statements, gathering names, locking down evidence. But Lauren didn't focus on that now. She focused on the oak trees swaying gently beside Mikey's plaque, on the faces of family and friends standing firm, and on the simple truth General Ramsey had just confirmed. This wasn't over. It was only beginning. The evening stretched on, the sky darkening to a deep indigo as the crowd at Oakridge Memorial Park refused to disperse. What had started as a quiet memorial had transformed into a gathering of community, veterans, legal observers, and media. But it wasn't a protest. Not yet. No one shouted, no one pushed forward. The power of the moment lay in its restraint, in the quiet authority of people who knew the difference between anger and action. Lauren stood with Maria and Carlos, her eyes scanning the scene. She could feel the shift in energy. The humiliation she'd endured was being replaced by something far more dangerous to those who'd wronged her. Attention. Serious, coordinated attention. General Ramsey returned from a brief phone call, her jaw tight. State Cybercrimes Unit confirmed. The anonymous call originated from a burner phone purchased yesterday. Cash transaction. Store surveillance footage is being reviewed. Lauren nodded. So, they're closing in. They are, Ramsey replied. But this goes beyond a prank call. The phrasing used in the report matches terminology found in extremist message boards. Language meant to provoke law enforcement response. Lauren's breath caught. They targeted me specifically? It appears so, Ramsey said, and they used Mikey's memorial to do it. Kessler and Holland were now separated. Internal Affairs officers had arrived, their expressions grim. Kessler stood stiffly near the cruiser, trying to maintain the illusion of authority. Holland, however, had changed. His bravado was gone, his sunglasses off, his face pale. He looked small, diminished. A representative from the Attorney General's office approached Ramsey and Lauren. General, Captain Carter, we've begun interviews. Civilian witnesses are cooperating fully. We've also recovered body cam footage from both officers." Lauren folded her arms. "And? There's audio," the investigator said. After Captain Carter provided her identification, Officer Kessler can be heard saying, and I'm quoting directly, "She's playing soldier, probably a diversity hire." Ramsey didn't flinch. "What about Holland?" "He doesn't contradict Kessler," the investigator continued. "In fact, he says, and I'm quoting, doesn't matter. These types always want special treatment." "These types," Lauren repeated softly, the words a bitter confirmation of what she'd suspected. "He said that?" "Yes," the investigator confirmed. Ramsey's eyes narrowed. "That language alone is enough for disciplinary action." "It's more than that," the investigator added. After Captain Carter requested to contact her commanding officer, Kessler jokes to Holland, again captured on the recording. "Sure, let's call her General. Maybe she'll send the cavalry." The words landed like a punch, not because they were cruel, but because they were careless. Careless enough to destroy careers. Lauren's voice was steady. "So they mocked me. They dismissed my ID, and they escalated." The investigator nodded. "That's the summary." "Noted," Ramsey said. "We'll include that in the official report." Lauren turned slightly, glancing toward the growing group of journalists behind the police perimeter. Some wore national network logos on their jackets: CNN, MSNBC, Fox News. The story had traveled fast, too fast for anyone to contain it. One of the younger veterans stepped forward, a woman in an army uniform, her boots polished. She saluted Ramsey, then Lauren. "Permission to speak, ma'am." Ramsey nodded. "Go ahead." "I've been watching the live streams," the woman said. "Other service members are watching too. This isn't just about today. This is about all of us. About what it means when, even in uniform, we're treated like suspects." Her words hung in the air, heavy and true. From the crowd, more veterans joined her, some nodding, some raising their hands, some with tears in their eyes. Lauren felt the surge of solidarity ripple through them. She wasn't just standing up for herself anymore. She was standing up for every service member who'd ever been questioned, doubted, disrespected. Ramsey's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, then lifted her head. "The governor's office just called," she announced. "They've reviewed the preliminary reports and civilian footage. The governor has authorized full cooperation between state military affairs and the Attorney General's office. They're fast-tracking the investigation." The crowd reacted with quiet approval. No cheering, just the solemn acknowledgement of progress. Maria squeezed Lauren's hand. "They can't hide now." "No," Lauren agreed. "They can't." At that moment, another investigator approached. "General, Captain Carter, one more development. Social media users have identified the vehicle seen in the surveillance footage where the burner phone was purchased. The license plate is registered to a man named Ethan Waller." Ramsey frowned. "That name is familiar." The investigator nodded. Waller is a known affiliate of a local extremist group, anti-government, anti-military. He's currently under probation for previous harassment charges. Lauren's pulse quickened. "So, this wasn't random." "No, ma'am," the investigator said. "Waller has a documented history of targeting military personnel, particularly women of color. We're issuing a warrant for his arrest now." The plot twist hit harder than Lauren expected. This wasn't just ignorance or incompetence. It was intentional, calculated. Someone had turned Mikey's memorial into a weapon against her. Ramsey placed a steadying hand on Lauren's shoulder. When this started, it looked like a case of profiling and procedural failure. It's now officially a criminal conspiracy investigation. Lauren nodded. Understood. The weight of the moment pressed on her shoulders, but it didn't crush her. It clarified everything. The humiliation she'd endured wasn't a product of chance or poor training. It was deliberate, and whoever had orchestrated it was about to face consequences far beyond public embarrassment. Internal affairs officers moved toward Kessler and Holland. Kessler tried to speak, but he was cut off. "Officers, you are being placed on administrative leave, effective immediately, pending termination review." Kessler's face flushed. "We were following a call-in tip. We did our jobs." "No," the lead investigator replied. "You ignored protocol. You ignored identification. You ignored the truth." Holland didn't speak. He simply nodded, as if he'd known this was coming from the moment Ramsey arrived. Ramsey addressed the crowd. "This is what accountability looks like. It's not always fast. It's not always clean. But it happens when people refuse to stay silent." The veterans in the crowd straightened. Civilians nodded. Journalists recorded every word. Lauren stood tall beside Maria and Carlos. "What happens next?" she asked. Ramsey answered without hesitation. "Now we expose every part of this. The officers, the false report, the hate groups behind it. And we ensure no one can sweep this under the rug." For the first time since the cuffs had clicked around her wrists, Lauren felt something stronger than anger. She felt certainty. This fight wasn't over. It was entering its most important phase. And this time, the entire country was watching. The sun had fully set by the time the official word spread through the crowd. The Attorney General's office had finished reviewing the preliminary evidence. The decision was made. Officers Kessler and Holland would not simply be placed on leave, they would be terminated, effective immediately, and criminal charges were being prepared. Civil rights violations, abuse of authority, conspiracy to obstruct justice. The weight of those charges hung in the cooling night air like thunder before a storm. When the announcement was made, no one cheered. This wasn't a victory to celebrate. It was justice, long overdue, the kind that too often never came. The crowd remained steady, phones lowered, eyes turned to Lauren, as if silently asking what came next. She wasn't sure. The case was moving faster than she could have imagined, but the questions kept growing. Not just about what had happened to her, but what had happened before. How many other calls had come from Waller or his associates? How many other veterans had been stopped, questioned, detained, or worse because of a system that accepted anonymous reports without scrutiny? The media was relentless now. National networks had set up just outside the park gates. Satellite trucks lined the road. Reporters waited for statements, microphones and cameras ready. But Lauren kept her distance. Ramsey had advised her to wait, to speak when the time was right, and she agreed. Today wasn't about sound bites. It was about truth. Colonel Eric Harper, a state military liaison, returned with an update. Waller's attorney has requested bail. The judge denied it. Flight risk. Lauren nodded. Good. Harper added. Waller's phone records show communication with at least 3 additional numbers linked to known extremist groups. We expect more arrests soon. Ramsey crossed her arms. They tried to turn this memorial into a trap, to use law enforcement as their weapon, and they almost succeeded. Almost, Lauren agreed. The body cam footage had been released to the Attorney General's office. Soon, it would be public record. The recordings showed everything. Lauren's calm compliance, her clear presentation of valid ID, the officers' mocking responses, the tightening of the cuffs, and, most damning, their discussion of handling the situation quickly before witnesses became involved. Those witnesses had become the cornerstone of the case. And now, the broader community was speaking up too. One by one, other veterans came forward with their stories, stopped in uniform, questioned, doubted. A Navy reservist shared how he'd been detained after a similar anonymous tip while speaking at a school assembly. An Army medic recounted being harassed during a Veterans Day parade. A Coast Guard officer had nearly lost his job after false accusations from a burner phone report. The pattern was undeniable, and the media was listening. That night, as the park lights glowed softly against the backdrop of the town, Ramsey gathered Lauren, Maria, and Carlos beneath the oak tree where the memorial had begun. "The governor will hold a press conference tomorrow," Ramsey said. "He's announcing new legislation, a mandate for all law enforcement agencies to implement verified protocols for identifying military personnel during civilian encounters." Lauren raised an eyebrow. "A mandate?" Ramsey nodded. "No more discretionary checks, no more gut instincts, solid verification procedures, and mandatory bias training for all officers statewide." Lauren let out a slow breath. "That's more than I expected." "You earned it," Ramsey replied. "By staying calm, by staying professional, by letting the truth speak louder than anger." Maria touched Lauren's arm. "Mikey would be proud." "I hope so," Lauren said softly. But Ramsey wasn't finished. "There's also talk of establishing a military-civilian liaison task force to monitor these kinds of incidents statewide, maybe even nationally." Lauren frowned thoughtfully. "That's a big step." "It's the right step," Ramsey said. Before Lauren could respond, an attorney from the Civil Rights Division approached. "Captain Carter, we've received hundreds of messages, not just from veterans, but from civilians, people who watched the live streams, people who said they never understood how deep this problem ran until now." Lauren smiled faintly. "Neither did I." The attorney added, "And there's something else. An anonymous donor has offered to cover all your legal fees, and if you choose to pursue a civil lawsuit against the department, they're willing to assist with that too." Lauren blinked. "I hadn't even thought about a lawsuit." "You don't have to decide now," the attorney said, "but the option is yours." Lauren nodded. It was a lot to process. Too much, maybe. But for the first time since the morning, she felt a measure of control returning. She wasn't just reacting anymore. She was deciding. The crowd had begun to thin, though many lingered. Veterans, family, friends, journalists who respected the gravity of the moment, and people Lauren didn't even know. Strangers who'd come to witness a rare thing. A wrong being publicly, undeniably corrected. Ramsey placed a hand on Lauren's shoulder. "One more thing. Internal Affairs is recommending that Kessler and Holland be barred from future law enforcement employment." Lauren raised an eyebrow. "You can do that?" "We can, and we will," Ramsey said. "Officers who abuse authority shouldn't get second chances at other departments." "Good," Lauren replied. As the final official statements were gathered and the crowd slowly dispersed, Lauren stood beneath the oak tree, watching the stars emerge in the night sky. The folded flag rested in Maria's lap, the same flag that had draped Mikey's casket, the same flag that represented service, sacrifice, and now resilience. Lauren knew this wasn't the end. The legal process would take time. The media storm would swell before it quieted, and the deeper investigation into Waller's network was only beginning. But the tide had turned. The truth had prevailed, and for the first time all day, Lauren allowed herself to exhale fully. She had stood her ground. She had refused to be silenced, and the nation had listened. By the next morning, the headlines were everywhere. Air Force veteran wrongfully detained at Memorial sparks national outrage. Officers terminated after ignoring military ID. Hate-driven tip triggers investigation. Every major network had picked up the story. Cable news, online outlets, even morning talk shows. Lauren's name and Mikey's name were no longer just part of a local scandal. They were symbols of something larger, symbols of the fight for respect, recognition, and justice. The governor's press conference began at noon sharp, held outside the state capitol building in Columbus, surrounded by veterans and service flags waving in the breeze. Lauren stood off to the side, flanked by General Ramsey, Colonel Harper, and her newly appointed attorney, Rachel Evans. She hadn't wanted to be the center of attention, but Ramsey had insisted she attend. "You need to hear this for yourself," the general had said. The governor spoke firmly, without the usual political polish. "What happened to Captain Lauren Carter was unacceptable, It was unlawful, and it was a direct result of systemic failures we can no longer ignore. He paused, glancing toward the gathered crowd. Today, we announce the immediate adoption of the Veteran Verification Act. Law enforcement agencies statewide will be required to follow strict protocols when engaging with individuals who identify as active duty military or reservists. A ripple of approval moved through the audience. The governor continued. Failure to follow these protocols will result in disciplinary action and potential criminal charges. In addition, mandatory racial bias training will be implemented across all agencies, and a new military-civilian liaison task force will oversee the handling of any future incidents. Cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled furiously, but the governor wasn't finished. Finally, he said, his voice steady, we acknowledge that the false report which triggered this tragedy was not an isolated event. Hate-driven abuse of emergency services will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. We will not allow extremist harassment to manipulate our law enforcement or endanger our citizens. As the governor stepped back from the podium, applause erupted. Not wild cheering, but steady, determined applause, the kind that meant agreement, commitment. Ramsey turned to Lauren. They listened. Lauren nodded. They had to. But even as the reforms were announced, the investigations continued. By that afternoon, federal agents confirmed that Ethan Waller's communications had led them to 4 additional suspects, all members of an online network dedicated to targeting minority service members. Each had priors for harassment and intimidation. All were now in custody. The conspiracy was larger than anyone had feared, but it was also unraveling. For the first time, Lauren felt the balance shifting in the right direction. Kessler and Holland had been officially charged that morning. Civil rights violations, abuse of authority, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. Their mugshots were released to the press, an image that carried a quiet, undeniable irony. The men who'd tried to paint Lauren as a criminal were now criminals themselves. Civil rights organizations issued statements of support. Veteran groups offered pro bono legal assistance. Lauren's name spread like wildfire across social media platforms, with countless voices sharing her story, praising her courage, and vowing to stand with her. It was overwhelming, a tidal wave of support from strangers and veterans alike, igniting a sense of unity and strength that pulsed through every message and call for justice. Her attorney, Rachel Evans, approached later that afternoon. Captain Carter, the department has offered a settlement, a financial settlement. They want to avoid a civil trial. Lauren raised an eyebrow. Of course they do. They're offering a significant amount, enough to compensate for damages, legal fees, and more. Lauren thought carefully. She could take the money, end the ordeal quickly, quietly. But then she looked at Ramsey, at Harper, at the veterans who'd stood with her from the beginning, at Maria and Carlos, still clutching the folded flag that had started all of this. No settlement, Lauren said firmly. We go to trial. The public needs to hear every detail. They need to see this through to the end. Evans nodded. I thought you'd say that. And so the case moved forward. Within hours of her decision, more people came forward. Not just witnesses, not just supporters, but other victims. A Marine veteran who'd been stopped and questioned after an anonymous tip while wearing his uniform to a charity event. An Army medic detained during a parade after a caller claimed she was posing as a soldier. A Coast Guard officer who'd nearly lost his job after false accusations stemming from another burner phone report. The pattern was undeniable, and Lauren's case had cracked it wide open. As the sun began to set, Lauren returned to Oakridge Memorial Park. She stood alone this time, beneath the oak tree where the memorial had taken place. The crowds were gone. The reporters were gone. It was just her and Mikey. She traced the edges of the plaque with her fingers. I didn't want this, she whispered. I just wanted to honor you. The breeze rustled the leaves overhead. "But if I have to fight," she continued, "I'll fight for you, for me, for everyone who's ever been made to feel small for wearing this uniform." Footsteps approached. General Ramsey. "You've done more than fight," the general said softly. "You've changed the conversation." Lauren turned. "It's not over yet." "No," Ramsey agreed, "but it's heading in the right direction." They stood together in the fading light. Two women shaped by service, by sacrifice, and by the refusal to back down. Lauren took a deep breath. "Tomorrow, we prepare for trial." "Yes," Ramsey replied. "But tonight, we remember why we fight in the first place." Lauren looked at Mikey's plaque one last time. "For those who served," she whispered, and for the first time in days, she felt a quiet sense of peace. The battle wasn't over, but she wasn't fighting alone. Not anymore. The courtroom was packed, not just with officials and attorneys, but with veterans, service members, families, and people who'd traveled from across the country to witness the final chapter. Some wore uniforms, others civilian clothes with pins and patches that told their own stories of service. Lauren sat at the plaintiff's table, Rachel Evans by her side. General Ramsey sat directly behind her, a steady presence. Colonel Harper was present, as was a representative from the Attorney General's office. In the gallery, Maria and Carlos held the folded flag, their faces a mix of grief and hope. The trial wasn't about guilt or innocence anymore. That had been decided. The criminal charges against Kessler and Holland were moving through a separate process. They'd pleaded not guilty, but the evidence was overwhelming. Video, audio, witness statements. The jury would likely convict quickly. But this trial was civil, about accountability, about putting every fact, every failure, every abuse into the permanent record. A record no one could deny, rewrite, or bury. The judge called the court to order. Rachel Evans opened the case with a powerful statement. "This is not just about one wrongful detention. This is about a pattern, a systemic failure, and the courage of one woman who refused to be silent." Witness after witness took the stand. Veterans who'd been at the memorial, the cyber crimes investigator who traced the burner phone, the lead investigator who confirmed Kessler and Holland had responded to multiple false reports before, Sarah Jenkins, whose live stream had sparked the movement, her voice trembling as she recalled the fear and determination that had kept her filming. The footage was played in court. Lauren watched herself on the screen, calm, collected, respectful, even when dismissed, even when the cuffs were locked around her wrists. Then came the audio, the officers' mocking words, their disbelief, their bias, their disregard for truth or procedure. The courtroom was silent as the words echoed. "She's playing soldier, probably a diversity hire. These types always want special treatment. Let's see if her general sends the cavalry." The judge's expression darkened. Jurors shifted uncomfortably. Even the defense attorneys seemed at a loss. Kessler and Holland sat at the defense table, looking smaller than Lauren had ever seen them. Kessler avoided eye contact. Holland stared at the table, his hands clenched. General Ramsey took the stand last. She spoke with calm authority. "I've served for over 35 years. I've led men and women through disaster zones, conflict zones, recovery missions. In all that time, I have never witnessed a greater abuse of authority against a service member than what happened to Captain Lauren Carter." She paused. "And I have never seen a greater example of professionalism and dignity under pressure than Captain Carter displayed that day." Lauren's throat tightened, but she held her composure. Ramsey continued, "These officers not only violated protocol, they violated trust. Trust between law enforcement and those who serve. Trust that must be rebuilt through accountability and change." The defense declined to cross-examine. The judge recessed briefly before delivering the verdict. When court resumed, the room felt electric with anticipation. The judge spoke clearly, leaving no room for doubt. The court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Captain Lauren Carter. The defendants are ordered to pay damages for wrongful detention, emotional distress, and civil rights violations. Additionally, punitive damages are awarded, reflecting the severity and malice of their actions. A murmur ran through the gallery. The numbers didn't matter to Lauren. The compensation wasn't why she'd come. It was the acknowledgement, the validation, the official recognition that what had been done to her was not acceptable. Not just in the eyes of the public, but in the eyes of the law. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered. Veterans, community members, supporters holding signs. Justice for Lauren. Respect the uniform. Accountability matters. Lauren stepped out into the sunlight, Ramsey at her side. Cameras flashed. Reporters surged forward. But Lauren held up a hand. "I will speak," she said, "but I will say only this." The crowd quieted. This was never about money. This was never about revenge. This was about respect. About making sure no one else has to endure what I endured. About ensuring that our service members are honored, not harassed, and that no one, not even those in positions of power, is above accountability. She paused. And let this also be a message to those who think they can use hate and fear to control others. We will not be silent. We will not back down, and we will not forget. The applause was immediate, not raucous, but steady, strong, unified. Lauren turned to Ramsey. "Thank you." Ramsey shook her head. "Don't thank me. You carried this. You led." As the crowd began to disperse, reporters shouting questions, Lauren chose not to answer. She spotted Maria and Carlos near the courthouse steps, still holding the flag, still standing tall. Lauren walked over and embraced them. Maria whispered, "Mikey would be proud." "I hope so," Lauren replied. In the weeks that followed, changes rippled across the state and beyond. The Veteran Verification Act became a model for other states. Departments adopted the new protocols. Training programs were updated. Officers dismissed for bias or misconduct were barred from future service. Federal investigations into extremist harassment networks expanded, leading to dozens of arrests. Online cells were dismantled. Lauren's case became a touchstone, a reminder that standing up mattered, that dignity could triumph over discrimination, that one voice, joined by many, could change the course of a system. And as Lauren returned to her work, quietly, without fanfare, she carried not just the memory of Mikey's service, but the knowledge that her own service had taken a new form. Justice, accountability, and the unbreakable promise that no uniform, no matter who wore it, would ever be disrespected without consequences again. What happened to Captain Lauren Carter wasn't just a story about wrongful detention. It was a mirror held up to our society, a reminder that respect must be earned, but it must also be defended. Lauren's courage showed us that silence in the face of injustice is not an option. Her calm defiance, her choice to stand tall even when humiliated, and her refusal to let anger overpower dignity are lessons for all of us. For those who have served or who love someone who has served, Lauren's story is a reminder that the uniform does not grant immunity, but it deserves respect. It deserves recognition. And when that respect is denied, standing firm can lead to change, not just for oneself, but for an entire community. Her case led to real reforms, not because she shouted the loudest, but because she stood her ground. She let the truth do the shouting. She reminded us that even when the odds seem overwhelming, the steady voice of justice can still be heard. In today's world, where so many feel powerless against the weight of systems and prejudice, Lauren's story teaches us that courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's calm, focused, relentless. And now, it's your turn. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of the power of dignity, service, and community. Don't let it end here. Share this message. Talk about it. Keep the conversation alive. Let others know that standing for what's right still matters. Please like, share, and subscribe for more stories that honor those who serve and those who refuse to back down. Because together, we don't just watch history, we shape it.